You can share with me, buddy.
I'm just gonna be quiet.
No, here, look. We can sing our duet. Like,
Yeah.
Do you guys think about how they're going to frame, like, what they wear for their panels?
no.
Yeah, I just was. Who's that? Oh, Joshua Jason. Oh, great. Oh, wonderful. Let's go. It's great to meet you. What's your name, Alvar? Alvar. Oh, great to meet you. Yeah. Yeah, Josh isn't going to be here, is he? Yeah. Oh, no, that's great. Oh, wonderful. That's great. He's an awesome dude. He's a great guy. Okay, absolutely. Thanks, Alvar. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that.
I don't know if you have room in your wallet for all the cards you're gonna get.
He just works for my PR agent.
Oh, your PR agent. Okay.
Just a little Hollywood stuff.
Well, I wouldn't understand. That's not how we roll in Altadena.
Yeah.
We're our own PR agents in Altadena.
Because if you go to Google and type Margaret Dunlap and see what it covers, the first two are Petaluma and Family Therapist.
Oh, I see Tiffany.
This number.
What is she doing? She's getting
Take a photo.
If she had a hit book show, she would have that as you.
Yeah, if she had written for middle maps, it would
Gotta
be
make sure
more
my
than
cellular
Oh.
device is turned off.
I guess it would be considered rude to be checking our email during this. Although it is a
Between
digital.
Middleman and Eureka.
Yeah, right.
So that, what better way? I'm going to tweet my answers.
Some really nice
I made a
slides.
watch for Eureka. It was a fun show.
Oh, you're trying to find a Wi-Fi connection?
Yeah, no Wi-Fi. Seem to hook the VGA into.
Or do you need a USB to VGA?
Yeah. I'm clearly
That should be pretty elementary.
I think you guys would know that, right?
Out of tech.
You know what to do? How much are we at?
So it's making money. I mean, to the thing, not just.
Hi, I'm Catherine Clinch, and I'm your moderator, and we are waiting to see if there is a VGA hookup so we can show some slides. Have we found that? Okay. Any chance anybody has one in their pocket?
You guys look tech savvy. Come on, somebody's got to have one.
To hook a, no, a Surface Pro up to the slides?
Can't she hack her way?
I don't know. Let me see.
I think you need USB, right?
Yeah, I need
Yeah.
a little thing that goes in here. But will that then,
So
but that's not going to go in here.
On the right side of the room.
No.
Two. It was only two. It was in her eyes. She put it.
Oh, okay.
That's why I came in.
Are these microphones?
The guy who was here. said-
Testing.
Oh, please.
Well, it's cool.
It's like the way it works now for social media. So
It's the little.
Yes.
Pro doesn't have HDMI.
But- No, because the little plug in. Hmm. No, okay, so now I'm ostracized because I don't have Apple. And it is your loss because I had some really spiffy slides. So welcome to the Creative Masterclass for TV writers. Can I get a quick idea of how many of you in the room are or want to be TV writers? Okay, so here are the basic ground rules. Yes. Yes. Super good, thank you. Yay. Okay, hero to the rescue.
Are we doing this?
Thank you so much.
Like that?
I was
Don't take mine.
video myself saying hi to Tiffany on the microphone.
Can you bring it up?
Talking again, so I called.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
What kills me about being a fan of Game of Thrones is that I can't then watch Game of Thrones because
Is there a web series?
it's a Game of Thrones.
You should get me out of this thing now.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. I think it's a mistake.
It's on your eye. It has a different
Thank you so much.
it has some different.
Yeah, usually men.
No, it's not.
Like the lead on something.
You want to put this in?
It actually helps. Like sometimes Game of Thrones, like, what did I just say?
Yeah, right.
You need that 5-minute distillation.
You joined the academy, didn't you? TV.
Now then, the purpose of this panel is to introduce you to the way that TV writers live and work. And the only ground rule I'm going to say is when we open it up to questions and when we are finished, please do not ask anyone to read anything. The worst thing you can ask a writer is to read your script, because if they're reading your script, they're not writing their own. And also because that way we can get into a much more candid discussion. Thank you so much. Okay. And a touch screen or no? No. Okay. Yeah, like now I'm going to be fussy, okay? Now I'm fussy. Okay, let's see if this comes up. Yes. The rolling circle of death.
Oh, the suspense.
See, now it's going to be totally anticlimactic because how good can see? That's not mine.
That's the Amen Gala Rain Warrior.
Oh.
Go to your file and open.
I
Kill
thought,
that one. Kill
Yeah,
it
just go
there.
out there.
okay. Oh, here we are. Okay. And we go to slides,
Bottom. Bottom.
bottom.
Stripes.
There.
Lower. There you go. That right there.
Thank you. You rock. You are my hero. So basically what we're doing today is we are looking at a full spectrum of TV writing, because it has become apparent now that YouTube is officially the fourth network, or the fifth network, excuse me. And so we have representatives from network, we have representatives from digital, and we have a development exec who's also a producer. Let's start with Margaret Schrader. Margaret has written Dancing and produced Dancing with the Stars, All Access, the second screen programming. She is on the New Media Council at the Producers Guild of America and is working with iPowwow, which is a second screen program. David North has written for NCIS, NCIS Los Angeles, Rizzoli and Isles, and is currently on Scorpion. Christopher Silber is on Cold Case, has been on Cold Case, NCIS New Orleans and CSI New York, and NCIS as well. Margaret Dunlap has been on Eureka, Middleman, Welcome to Sandition, and the pivotal web series, The Lizzie Bennett Diaries. Samuel Miller is on Mom, which may have led him to create something called LA Beer, because if you watch that show, it kind of pushes you into needing a little something. And I mean that in the best of all ways. He is an Eagle Scout. He is a black belt in Taekwondo. So please do not ask him to read anything, because he is also a specialist at tossing nunchucks. Adam Fratto is the co-founder of Harvardwood. He is currently on Haven, has been on Greek, Wildfire, The Dead, and The Dead Zone, and Walking with Giants, which was an early environmental piece. My background is writing old TV shows when they were still new. Hunter, Jake and the Fat Man, Foul Play, Heart to Heart, The Love Boat, Knight Rider, and Rescue Bots most recently. And that is what I looked like when I was writing those, in case anyone wants to remember me. And so basically, we're going to get started. And what I wanted to do is a conversation. So we're not going to go up and down the aisle, but I had met a fellow who was a film writer at a Google event. And he was being paid to write his third feature film and had his second one in production. And I said, what do you want to do next? And he said, gee, I just wish I could get into television. And I thought that was incredibly telling because we are kind of in a golden age. So if we could each break my rule and quickly go down the aisle for just like 15 seconds, tell how you got into television and why you chose television. Margaret?
I didn't really choose television. I chose digital and just an ecosystem of storytelling. I think everything is coming together, and why choose one? So.
May I borrow this?
It's all yours.
I always knew I wanted to be a television writer, and so I interned with the writers at David Letterman when I was in college. So I thought I wanted to be a comedy writer. I moved out here and got a PA job on a show called JAG, which at the same time was developing NCIS, and that led to a staff position on NCIS, and now I'm on Scorpion. A bunch of stuff in between happened. Chris is up.
I studied theater and playwriting in college, and I thought that TV seemed like the next logical step. So I came out to LA in 2000, and I applied to the Warner Brothers writing program, which was more like a seminar for a few weeks, but it was sort of a launching point that got me into my first staff job.
Yeah, I wanted to write for television because I grew up watching television, and I'm like this. I think early in college, a guy came in to talk about writing for TV, and he's like, basically, we sit around all day and we talk about fictional people as though they're real, and I'm like, I would like that job. And I got my first job in television was when a mentor of mine hired me to be the writer's assistant on his series, The Middleman, and that led to my first freelance episode, and that was the one that got started.
I got into screenwriting in high school and then TV writing in college, doing something for the campus station. And an alumnus, Chad Gervich, who's written 2 books on TV writing that I highly recommend, hooked me up with an internship at ABC that turned into a couple years in comedy development there. And then I transitioned to Desperate Housewives as a writer's PA, moved up as a writer's assistant there. And then 5 years later, I made it up to staff writer on Mom.
I don't write for television. I don't want to write for television. I really enjoy hanging out with people far smarter than me who do write for television, such as my colleagues here. What got me interested in television was I grew up a complete movie snob, was not allowed to watch television. So all the things that you wrote for were like, that was forbidden fruit. And I was a baby executive working for Michael Douglas's company, and nobody could afford HBO at the time. So we would get these clandestine care packages from CAA of, and I'm really dating myself, VHS tapes of The Sopranos. And we would hand them around like crack or Judy Blume's Forever or something, you know, so this great currency. And we were all so amazed that television could be like that, could be like movies. And plus everybody I knew who was working in TV was happier than everybody I knew who was working in film. So my next job was as a television executive, and I haven't looked back. That was about 12 years ago.
I was in the Directors Guild training program and discovered after the first year and a half that I really hated being on the set. And so it probably wasn't going to work out well. And then I realized writers never go to the set. And I thought, well, that'll do. So Chris and David, because you're both involved with the same kind of shows and you both know each other from working on those shows. What's the crosstalk like between shows like NCIS and this NCIS New Orleans or the spinoffs, CSI New York? How much crosstalk is there and how common is it for, well, how much the shows differ actually?
May I take that?
Yeah.
The NCIS is, there's a crosstalk on NCIS and NCIS New Orleans. Those are both run by the same person, the same showrunner, but NCIS Los Angeles, it was created by another person, so they really don't connect at all as far as that goes.
As for the CSI franchise, when I was on CSI New York and all three of the shows were going, there was almost no crosstalk at the writers level. The executive producers sort of talked to each other, but it was sort of like this weird alliance between countries where they're aligned together, but they don't really like each other. So we would actually have to submit ideas or arenas for ideas to the Jerry Bruckheimer company, who was the production company that put all the shows together, and request that we could hold certain arenas, certain story ideas, and sometimes we'd be pushed away because it's, the mothership got prominence over us. We were the redheaded stepchild, but that's sort of how that worked there. And like David said, with the NCISs, the two shows that are together right now, NCIS and NCIS New Orleans, we are allowed to crosstalk and we talk a little bit, but there's not a lot of collaboration. We're definitely two different shows that have our own thing going on.
Well, given that they're two different shows that basically are the same show, what are the points that, just different locations? I watch them. Okay. So how is it that you try to differentiate your series from the original mothership?
Well, the NCIS, the mothership, it's its own thing. The way the characters interact, the relationships, and the humor that's underneath the show cannot really be replicated on another show. So while yes, both shows are about Navy cops who solve Navy cop crimes, there's a different flavor that you get from the mothership and hopefully from the new show, New Orleans, which we're still trying to figure out what the voices of the characters are, what's unique about that show.
CBS has always tried, when they've developed, first it was Los Angeles, then New Orleans, they've been really cognizant of trying to make the shows different because, it is in the end going to have NCIS in the title. And that's why Los Angeles, they went with, LL Cool J. It's Mark Harmon and LL Cool J. It's about, can't get much further apart than that.
So at what point in the process do you start thinking about second screen? Or do you not think about second screen?
I'll tell you, I don't think about it in the process when I have my writer's hat on, because I'm thinking about what's going to make the best story and does the plot work and will production like it. The day-to-day showrunner on my show is very conscious and very thoughtful about second screen, about how we're received through social media. It's become part of his life, so it's become part of our lives. But that's a different hat that we're wearing once the episode is done, and once we're thinking about it airing and things we can do to support it from that perspective.
When I started on NCIS in the beginning, working for Belisario, who had old school writer who had done Magnum PI and Quantum Leap and countless things, he didn't want to hear anything about internet or digital, nothing at all. Now on Scorpion, I know the showrunner's looking into trying to create some comic book content online that matches one of the characters, comic book he likes. So, I think it's been evolving, but a lot of it in the end comes back to personality of the person of the showrunner making the choices.
Just to interject, it's interesting to see how showrunners have transcended their sort of head writer status to become brand managers, and really are leading that charge and expanding it beyond the mothership viewing experience.
It's absolutely true, because those who aren't interested in it doesn't become a priority, and that's where you're not really able to be dynamic in how you address this new frontier. But those who are really into it are really into it and get everyone else into it.
And I just want to say that actually makes for the better experience. Bill Prady with The Big Bang Theory was a very early adopter of Twitter, and a lot of his fans were there, and it felt very authentic that he was on there and that he was engaging and that he was, sourcing set decoration for the show from Twitter. So, there is a benefit to it, but it's not something that you can force upon a show. The show has to generally want to engage and do it.
So Adam, what's the recipe for a hit show? You've been on some.
You just tell the best story you can and pray that it finds an audience and connects, and you lock down your ship as tightly as you can and try to be fair, decent people, be nice to dogs, all the basics. What I'm really saying is it's mostly luck and alchemy, and some experience plays into it. Sorry.
How do you orchestrate the cast of characters behind the scenes when you're putting together a show? The writer, the producers,
There's a million different ways to do it. The question was, how do you orchestrate all the people that go into making a series? And everybody here probably has a different idea about that. But the best single way to do it is to have a defining vision that comes from one person that you can point to and say, that's where the buck stops. And all the rest of us just support that vision. Unfortunately, there are often many, many cooks in the kitchen, whether they are creative or financial or broadcasters or distributors, studios. But the only way to cut through some of that clutter is to have one person that you can point to. And that could be the showrunner, that could be just the initial creator, could be a couple people, but that's the only recipe for success that I can really point to, because when you don't have it, you feel it right away.
What makes a show fall apart then?
It could be the lack of that. It could be a lack of consensus around what the show really is. It could be that it was put together by optimism, not by realism. I don't know, guys. That's a really long list.
Lots of cooks in the kitchen is always very, very difficult to deal with. Content is king, creativity is king, and the writers really are where that comes from. So if you don't have a unified vision behind what your content's going to speak to, and finding your audience early on is always a really, really big win. That's where a show can really fall apart, even a really great show. I'm thinking actually Eureka and Warehouse 19 and shows like that, which I love. They didn't stay on for very, very long runs because they weren't able to find an audience. Margaret might disagree with me on that. On Eureka has a huge audience.
Eureka ran for 5 seasons,
For 5 seasons, yeah,
and
sorry about
over
that.
7 years, and Warehouse 13 had a very solid run. So
Bad references. Sorry,
I
guys.
mean, shows certainly do, like,
Yeah.
something like Firefly, which was absolutely
Firefly's
loved in the geek community.
Exactly. I retract all my examples. Firefly.
The other thing to point out here is just before we throw around the term hit too loosely, what is a hit and what defines a hit is really up for grabs these
Yeah,
days, because
Absolutely.
you have this panel fairly split between the kind of the ultimate old school broad audience hit makers, and we have 3 people here who are in the CBS 10, and a CBS hit versus a hit for the Sci-Fi Channel or for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation means very, very different things with different priorities and different numbers.
Yeah.
And part of what's exciting about television, with they toss out words like super serving and niche and all of this, is that you can do something fairly small and targeted and it will still be a hit within its own world. It may not be a CSI level franchise.
Yeah.
And then finding new life on online distributors like Hulu. Community is one of my favorite examples. It's like 6 seasons in a movie, and you never thought they were going to get it, and now they're on Yahoo Screen. I watch it every single week, and I'm glad that show is a little show that will not die because its audience refuses to let it. So.
Well, Margaret D., how about on a show like Lizzie Bennet Diaries?
About finding its audience, or
About how does a show like that define itself as a hit?
It's interesting on Lizzie Bennet because Lizzie Bennet Diaries was a series on YouTube. It still is on YouTube. It's a modern day update of Pride and Prejudice, told vlog style. And for us, because we started out as such an independent production, we weren't part of a multi-channel network. We weren't a YouTube partner channel. We were putting up videos the same way you put up videos of your cat, literally. And one of our episodes was, in fact, a video of a cat. But I think it's a case where, because you are in this new space doing something new and experimental, you define your success in different ways. And for us, that, the first time we went to VidCon and the room for our panel was full half an hour before the panel was supposed to begin, it's like, okay, people are watching us. And, the view counts are steadily increasing, in spite of the fact that, to understand episode 95, you really did kind of have to watch episodes 1 through 94. And that's a commitment. And and just, having, at the most basic level, that we were able to bring in enough through ad revenue or eventually partnerships that we had the budget and the support to be able to finish telling our story. And that was a huge success for us. But one of the nice things about being in the news space is we were able to define for ourselves, like, what makes it worth it for us to keep going.
Sam?
When I worked in development, I had a boss who said that it's a business of failure. You look at how badly the attrition rate is for shows on network. And one of the things that cable's done very successfully is they've been able to, improve that batting average by taking their time with it. You look at a show like Desperate Housewives, Mark Cherry is someone with a vision, and that's, an ingredient, but he worked on that show for 2 years. It had a lot of different incarnations. It had a great cast. It probably wouldn't have been a hit without that cast. There's so many things that can make a network or a broadcast kind of show fall apart. And, it's very interesting seeing the cable space. Mad Men was defined as a hit for AMC, and back when it premiered, the networks were like, we would never do a show like Mad Men because it couldn't possibly pull the numbers we'd want on network. And then I think 2 Sundays ago, Mad Men beat whatever was on NBC at the time. So, the entire metric for what is a hit is changing radically, over the last 5 years. And for the next 5 years, I don't know if you can say Community is a hit for Yahoo. I don't know how you say Bosch is a hit for Amazon, except if maybe they sell more Michael Connelly books. But that's a different definition of what a hit is than what we traditionally think about, with the wonderful Nielsen metrics, which, tell us exactly how many people are watching.
I think Community is an interesting example, which sort of parallels, Mad Men, even, if you look at, it established AMC as a network where you would go for scripted original programming. How many people were watching video content on YouTube before they were putting up the season of Community? That anchors their entire platform there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, in a scenario where you have pretty extreme characters like on Mom, okay, how far can you go without going too far?
One of the things that's amazing about Mom is that we have many incredible actors on the cast, but with Allison Janney and Anna Faris, you need to have the talent there that's on screen that can ground stuff. And it's always a conversation in the room. What is too much? What is too far? Are we going to lose the audience with this person doing this kind of a thing? And I think part of the benefit to the television writing process is having a group of people talking about that. It's very easy to get in your own head when you're writing a pilot and be like, no, this makes sense. It's a lot harder to do that in a room of 10 other people being like, I don't get what you just said, so let's try something else. You do, I think, want to push things in the current landscape. I was very surprised by the Coach reboot on NBC, because to me that doesn't seem like a situation where you can really push something to be noisy enough that it's going to break out of it. I think casting LL Cool J is something that, will help you push it a little bit further. But at the same time, the audience has to relate to it. Lena Dunham did a web series called Downtown Divas on YouTube before she did Girls. And if you look at that show, it's very bright, it's very flashy, it's very over the top, it's very ridiculous. These people aren't real people, and that resonates in a YouTube world. Whereas for Girls on HBO, it's much more grounded, it's much more drab and realistic. And I think in TV, at least, people want to relate to the characters still.
Well, I don't want to break anybody's heart, but it was just kind of established that the median age of people watching CBS is 59. So Coach reboot is kind of like a no-brainer, because you liked it before, you're probably going to like it again. Oh, you're all old now, So this is for Chris and David, because you're really on plot-driven shows. And
old plot-driven shows.
and thank you, by the way, for having that little MacGyver element in Scorpion.
Yeah.
You're welcome. We watch the show a lot. It's always like, well, if we do this, and it's like things normal people would never think of, which makes it fun. And how far can you go with a plot before you've pushed it over the plausibility line?
Well, I think it's just about the ground rules need to be established. And once they're established, there's just stories that I could tell on Scorpion that I could never tell on NCIS or LA or Rizzoli and Isles. It's just, you take it so much further because the ground rules have been established that these guys are, super geniuses and they're going to save the world every Monday night. Once you've established that, you start to look at it differently and realize you can do different things. At one point I wrote nearly an entire act about a ferret on Scorpion. And you don't have ferrets in NCIS, but you roll with it.
So how involved is the real Walter in the scripting process? Or is he?
He's around sometimes. I don't think I really want to comment on that.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
I want to know what NCIS has against ferrets.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see about getting some ferrets in next season.
Okay,
Yeah,
I appreciate
I
that.
can't speak for the mothership, but for New Orleans, I will do my best.
Thank you.
Crossover episode.
Aren't ferrets indigenous to New Orleans? So Adam, what's the perfect personality from a producer's point of view of the best kind of showrunner there is?
I don't know how you guys feel about this. I think that there is no one kind of showrunner. I mean, it's barely a job that one person can do. It's in film, it would be the writer, the director, the producer, and several other roles all rolled in together. It is a superhuman Herculean, help me, writers.
Herculean.
See, I told you I need these guys. Herculean task, and there are, I could probably count on one hand the people I know who I think really are showrunners who do all those pieces. So I would separate it out, and I would say that you need that singular creative vision, and you need that person who actually is carrying the torch, who is the brand manager. You also need somebody who can deal with the network, which is a full-time job in and of itself, dealing with notes and translating it. You need somebody who can run the room, who is like the head writer part of being a showrunner. You need somebody who can do all the production part of being a showrunner, which is to interface with production, deal with all the micro decisions that really fall onto his or her shoulders, which is, you know, casting and wardrobe and all of that other stuff, and then all the politics, and then all the second screen. You really, all of that comes to roost at the desk of the showrunner, which really means it's probably some version of a team at the end of the day. We have started fetishizing showrunners in the television industry because we want there to be this genius person who, you know, is the creator, is the auteur in the new television. Sometimes there is that person, or sometimes it's just a bunch of hype. So I'm going to deflect the showrunner question by saying that I'm not sure there really necessarily always is a showrunner. Really, what you need is to the extent that there is one, if you need somebody who's made a very strong stuff, who can tolerate having a target painted on his or her back from all directions, because that's really mostly what it is.
Yeah, we left out dealing with the main cast,
Oh,
which is its
yeah.
own full-time position.
That's full-time
And then
too.
post-production.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot involved, and the people who I've been lucky enough to work with some great showrunners. Mostly they are good at delegating. I think this is my personal opinion on what makes a good showrunner, because there are certainly showrunners who don't like delegation. But the ones who make it, at least from the writer's point of view, make it a better experience, or delegators, are people who have a strong opinion, and at the end of the day, you know, the buck stops with them, but they're willing to hear what you have to say, and they're willing to use you for what your talents are. And it feels like a collaboration. Even at the end of the day, it becomes the showrunner's call across the board.
And when it's not like that, everyone feels it. Everyone on the writing staff, the producers, I mean, all the way down to the cast. So, I mean, it's starts with the showrunner, ends with the showrunner, and it's a night and day difference when it's a collaborative process, and everyone's rooting for each other. But, you know, unfortunately, it's, you know, like any job, it's not always going to be the case.
From a second screen perspective, because we are perpetually the redheaded stepchild of television shows, if the showrunner isn't really strongly invested and doesn't have a creative vision for what the second screen experience is going to be, we come up with our own original ideas. But what we often do is we collaborate with the writers and work on ancillary content that they don't have time to develop for the show. If you want to have a lot of fun on something that might be more fan driven, or taking, you know, B and C storylines and really building them out, having a showrunner that encourages writers to produce that kind of content, to just create that kind of content and have it available in a time frame that we can turn around and hit our deadlines, that just makes the whole ecosystem so much richer.
I'm going to change the subject now. David, you kind of won the fantasy island of starting off as a writer's assistant and then getting a script and then getting on staff. How did that happen? And why is it so challenging for so many writers assistants who do season after season of shows and never break that point?
Yeah, for me, the situation was just, it was the beginning of NCIS, and the show's creator just wasn't happy with the material he was getting from his writing staff. And I was, making copies and getting coffee, and started to write an NCIS script, and just thought, it can't hurt when I'm sitting at my desk. So then when I had 3 acts done, I gave it to the head writer, not the showrunner, but the head writer, and he liked it, and he gave it to the showrunner. So when I came in that morning, they'd put the script in prep, so I had to write the 4th act, and put me on staff. And then that was how it happened. Now that, it's not typically going to be the case. Most showrunners would never do that, but the guy I worked for, he literally called all the shots, even with the network. And so it was a simple thing for him to just say, this is what he wanted to do. As far as other assistants moving up, from my experience, I've seen it quite often. I working for Shane Brennan, who took over NCIS and then created NCIS Los Angeles. I mean, he promotes from within every year, it seems like, sometimes more than one person. And then other situations, I'll come onto a show and see that, the show's been on for years, and that writer's assistant's been in there the whole time as an assistant or a PA. And I just think a lot of it just comes down to the dynamic, the situation, and definitely, I mean, of course, the showrunner is not going to want to add to the workload just because you've been a loyal assistant. They have to really believe that you can do it. And I think sometimes it becomes a situation where you have someone that's a great writer's assistant, but maybe is not a great writer, or at least a great writer for that show. And then that's when you kind of see that situation where they're there, as an assistant for long periods of time.
Margaret D., how do shows find their writers online?
Not how do shows find their writers online, but how online shows
How do
find their
online
writers.
shows find
Yeah.
their writers? Excuse me.
Sorry, that was not an unclear question. It just took me a second to catch up with it. I think, in my experience, frequently it's the same way that the traditional TV finds its writers, which is they're people that you know and people you've worked with before, people, who submit samples or whose stuff you've read and liked. I had worked with a friend on a TV show who I knew was a huge Jane Austen fan. And so when I was working on Lizzie Bennet and we were starting to expand, I told Bernie Sue, the showrunner, I'm like, you really need to meet with my friend Kate Rorick because she would absolutely kill this show. And, they met and got on, and she came on and did. So, yeah, I don't think the process is that different. It's just, it may be a slightly different community and a slightly different set of connections. But I think, finding a good writer is finding a good writer, no matter what you're trying to find them for.
I just want to speak to that because Ellie Beer is a project that came out. I actually connect these a little bit. I was a writer's assistant on a TV Land show, and the boss had no interest in promoting people. He was quoted in a screenwriting book from 1995 saying, "I hire staff writers to sit on the couch and be quiet." So I was very frustrated in that experience. And a guy I had worked on a Nick show as a staff writer sent an email. There's a Yahoo TV writers list, which I highly recommend you all join. It's now over 900 people, might be around 1,000 people on this email chain about TV writing. And someone was like, "How long do you give yourself to make it?" And I said, "Fuck it, let's just do it." And so I said, if anyone wants to be part of a writer's room for a web series, I got 25 responses. About 10 people lasted through the first 10 months. 6 of us now have seen it through for 2.5 years. But my problem with a lot of people in Los Angeles, even your friends or people you've worked with before, it's hard. People can flake. But if you crowdsource through an online community and can find some people who are dedicated and really willing to put into the work, you might be able to bear fruits. But that's sort of the online community. It's the staffing version of crowdfunding, basically. I don't think there are a lot of opportunities for that, but there are some opportunities now with the internet where there is a lot of talent in Los Angeles, and even the people in this room could meet 3 other people and say, let's combine our resources and do something great. Because, in Lizzie Bennet was really high quality show when no one else was doing high quality shows on the internet. And now your competition is community. You know, you can't just have your iPhone and your friend who's not an actor. Like, we had a casting process, we had a writer's room because we really wanted to make premium content.
For the record, we also had the casting process, and it wasn't, you know, people are like, it's, you know, Ashley recording in her bedroom. It's like, no, it is Ashley with a camera and a crew in our producer's bedroom.
Very, very well lit.
Yeah, it was set decorated. Katie Most, our excellent production designer. But I do, you know, and I think that being said, I think you make a really good point there. For our second project, Welcome to Sanditon, we deliberately structured it for fans to create user-generated content to be able to interact with the main narrative, which is something that we couldn't really do with Pride and Prejudice because we all know how it ends. And we had a group of fans who got together, and there were like 6 of them, and they had a writer's room, and they had meetings. I swear they created more content for that show than we did. But it really was that sense of like, we all have this common thing, and they got together and they really did it, and they did awesome work.
I think it's worth pointing out, just from the perspective of what a writer's room is and how it came about. I mean, it's really the historical legacy of network shows that were designed to churn out 22 of something. And so you needed a factory full of people to churn it out. I'm not comparing you guys to factory workers, but I'm saying that's what the writer's room is. That's why you have people who are on staff and get paid to write scripts, is for volume. As television is changing in the way it's getting made, where it's getting made, how it's getting made, you're seeing shorter orders, you're seeing international co-productions, all of this. There is no one way to do a writer's room. I have a show in production right now that does not have a writer's room. All the scripts were done in advance by a quasi room of people on different continents. That's one way of doing it. You're also seeing more and more a common British model where there's one writer who's doing everything, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, you know, that's the True Detective model. So while we're all talking about the conventional way to break in and what a conventional writer's room is, just know that it's changing really fast.
Well, here's my question to that, because once upon a time when I was writing TV, there were no writer's rooms for our episodic. It was come in, have a meeting, go off, bring back your beat sheet, get approved, come back, bring back your first draft, and you knew who wrote every episode. And writers were able to establish brands. My question is, how does someone look at the writers from a show like CSI or NCIS in perpetuity and say, oh yeah, I remember your episode? How does a writer establish a sense of self in that scenario?
Writing original material. When I work on a show like NCIS New Orleans or CSI New York, or frankly, even if I was on a show like Mad Men, I'm writing to that show. And I want it to sound like that show and be that show. Then if I want to be unique, and I do, I write original material with my own voice. And that's how, you get a reputation by how you're received by your colleagues and the people you've worked for, and also the quality of the material you're writing on your own.
Do you write in the same genre?
I write in multiple genres, actually. Certainly crime has been very good to me. And I would never condescend to that at all. I like writing crime stories, but it certainly
pays.
It pays. Crime does pay.
Thank you for that.
No, I mean, I come from the theater. That's what I was interested in. I want to write about characters. Even when I work on procedural shows, I'm interested in the characters, whether they're the guest stars or our main characters. And when I work on my own material, certainly I'm interested in writing something that's character driven. I don't think you can find many television writers, at least at our level, who aren't thinking, gosh, I really want my Mad Men. I really want to work on cable. I want to do something small and interesting and not about solving a crime of the week.
I just sort of want to note the story of The Shield is that Sean Ryan was working on Nash Bridges, and the rule of the show was Nash has to be a good cop. He can't break any rules, and he has to get the girl at the end. And Sean, in response to this, wrote The Shield, where he beats a suspect, spoiler alert, with a phone book at the end of the first episode. So this was not a good cop. And I think, a lot of times there are people who write in reaction to what they're working on, or they just want supplemental material to show that they have the range to be doing different stuff.
But I will say, working in procedural television teaches you something that no other type of TV can teach you, which is structure. It teaches you in such a way that I know I've had many meetings where I've sat down with showrunners of other types of shows who've said, oh, what we really need is someone who comes from procedurals because they understand structure. And structure, as far as I'm concerned, is the key to whatever you're writing, period. It has to be structured. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has to have a flow. And that's something that I learned from being on all these various different crime shows.
I think another great thing that the digital space has done for writing is, again, it's lets writers take what might be, so you're told to write 22 minutes for a half-hour show, you're told to write 44, 46 minutes for an hour-long show, but what we're getting into right now with material that we're able to develop, having broadcast and second screen running alongside each other, is you can write all 60 minutes. And we will be able to eventually broadcast all 60 minutes. During that commercial break, you're going to be watching that extra 14, 16 minutes of content on your second screen, and it's going to build out storylines you were interested about. And as far as the live shows we do and reality shows we do, it lets them go beyond the box a little bit, take those rules and then stretch them.
And the advertisers are so happy about that.
The advertisers love us.
So I want to go back to Chris and David because, again, way back when there was no internet, and so we had to actually hunt down things that would help us make it more and better. And at a certain point, I had the blueprints to the White House, the specs to the shuttle, and a thing called the Killer's Handbook, which is a CIA operative of basically the scenario of what they did on the planes in 9/11. Now, it's all been shredded. Please don't knock on my door. Do you ever have any concerns that in becoming more and better and more detailed and more granular in all of this stuff, that you're helping the wrong side become more educated?
When I'm in a script, all my concern is getting it done. Yeah, I never go there as far as thinking what I'm putting out. One time I wrote something about somebody was smoking a cigarette, and I remember it occurred to me, like, I don't know if that's too good, but no, not as far as, I think what you're asking, like really giving people ideas how to yeah, I've never crossed that path, but I know maybe Chris has. He's a better person than me.
I mean, look, I don't think any of the shows that I've worked on, I don't think we've come up with some sort of master plan to pull off something that hasn't already been thought of by someone else. I certainly think about what message we're sending ethically and morally. I always think about that. I think it's important, especially working on shows that reach, 15, 20 million people in our country, let alone outside of our country. But I don't feel that we've had access we don't have blueprints to anything, I'll tell you that. We have retired agents who are giving us advice on, crimes that they solved, 10, 15 years ago.
I will say, when I was a writer's assistant, I was sure that my Google history had me on all kinds of watch lists.
For sure.
So where do we think that TV is going next? I mean, the quality is definitely supreme right now. Can we get better, or are we going to start looking at a downslide?
There was an interesting article the other day where someone was making the assertion that we've exited the golden age of television. We've now entered the silver age. And what that meant was that instead of the great show that you have to watch, there are a lot of good shows that a lot of people are watching, but they aren't necessarily the same tune-in of like The Sopranos. And, we are in a very, very noisy climate right now. And we're also in a very disruptive climate where people are talking about unbundling or, just going straight to the, digital networks kind of a thing. So, since I moved out here in 2007, and that was the writer's strike, and the economics of the industry has changed a lot since then. And I think in the next 5 years, we're still going to see it shift a lot.
I think there's just so much that we can do. I don't think it's the end of the golden age. I just think it's a different way of understanding how we consume the content. I remember reading an article. It must have been like the mid or late 90s about a movie where this movie actress was so put off that she was starring side by side with a television actress, and now we have movie actors who are dying to get in on television shows like, True Detective, I think might be the best example these days. But also you have the freedom to experiment and play around with format, play around with content, with syndication partners, and just how your audience is consuming your content. I think there's just a wide, a huge area for growth, and there's a huge opportunity for writers to create something that they would never have the opportunity to do in a procedural or on a network show. And they can put it out themselves is the other great thing.
Well, when you talk about True Detective, I mean, who would have thought the miniseries would come back? And go ahead.
Well, earlier you were talking about like, what do you do to make a hit? And, I think you have to do what no one else is doing. Television is a business of cycles. American Idol hit because people wasn't doing variety. Desperate Housewives, no one had done the nighttime soap. And then that died, and now Empire came back, and the nighttime soap is big again. So, I think for a lot of these places, like, you do have to look at what else is going on and how can your show be different.
Yeah, it's very cyclical. I mean, I think we're still going to be seeing a lot of the staples, the sitcoms and the procedurals of television persist. Who will be watching it and how, and who will be making money from that is probably what will shift.
So, Margaret S., the Producers Guild, not to besmirch our Writers Guild, but the Producers Guild seems to be at the forefront of looking at the new media and what YouTube can be and what it is now and where it should go. Although interestingly enough, there's no one on YouTube who goes, gosh, I wish I could get that pension plan. And so what is it about this
We have
that
no pension plan, by the way. We're a baby guild.
what is it about the Producers Guild that's made them so savvy as opposed to the others that are kind of?
We are much younger than the DGA and the WGA, number one. Being a producer is such a nebulous. My parents have no idea what I do. Every time I try to explain it to them, they're like, so money? I'm like, not really. So the Producers Guild grew out of a need about 10 years ago to really define what our profession is. But also we've had amazing mentorship from the WGA and the DGA. For new media, it grew out of a need to, we had people who are writing for video games. We have people who are writing long form web content. We have people who are writing for, all the amazing content you see on DVDs. My friend Jeff, that's all he does. Like every single special feature you have seen for Glee or any primetime hit show, if you get the DVDs and you see that second content, there is somebody writing and producing that, and that is Jeff. And so it was such a discredit to this incredible group of professionals to have to, to say I'm a producer and people like, oh, so you're just like the face of it, like you're just the money. I'm like, no, we're sometimes we are the everything, and sometimes we are one thing. The reason the New Media Council formed 5 years ago was really to give a voice to those people and to really lift ourselves up in the professional community. What we do is relevant, it's real, and it's necessary. And some folks in traditional media need to know where to seek those resources, and the New Media Council really provides that.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up for questions. We have time for a few. Yes?
What do you find is the best room in entertainment? Like, what made it so good?
Best writers' room?
Yeah.
Really, it's a question of the writers, how they interact with each other, and certainly the showrunner and what he or she expects from that writer's room. I've been lucky enough to be on 3 terrific writers' rooms. And that's not to say the other ones weren't terrific. It's just that they weren't writers' rooms. We didn't have them. We were off in our own offices, and that's much harder. But when you're with a group of writers who get each other, who play off of each other, who interact and accept each other, A, it's so much fun. You've never had more fun, and B, you're making story happen, and it feels good.
My first years on NCIS, well, Chris too, there was no writer's room at all. I mean, the room for us would be Chris and I trying to kind of sneak away to just bounce ideas off each other. But even in that case, it was like secretive. I mean, the showrunner wanted to know what everyone was doing individually. And so that's how I learned. And I think now, as tough as it was to be, right out of college, dealing with that pressure and stress and trying to figure out these stories, it's turned out to be a huge asset for me because I can do it on my own because I had to. And then a show like right now, what I'm on with Scorpion, it's writer's room all day. If you're not in script, then you're in the writer's room. And I think that room works so well because Nick Santoro, who's the creator of the show, he's the force behind it. he knows what he wants, and he wants out to hear everyone's ideas. And I mean, he's just a good guy. So it makes the room a comfortable place. I mean, I think that's a big thing, is you don't want to be in a spot where, and you'll see it sometimes, where people are just afraid to talk. They're afraid to throw something out because of how it's going to be received.
Yeah. The best writer's room I've ever worked in was, it had a great showrunner at the head of it. And also everybody in the room. I mean, writers' rooms always have a hierarchy, and so did this one, but it was also a hierarchy that was dedicated to mentorship from the top on down. Every writer, the mid-level writers were looking out for the lower level writers. The upper level writers were looking out for the mid-level writers. And that made a huge difference. It made it such a fantastic experience.
There's nothing worse than when you've got a room full of writers or a staff full of writers where people are out for themselves.
Yeah.
It's so destructive. It hurts everyone. Even if there's just one writer who's acting that way, it brings the entire process to a screeching halt.
And I would just add, don't judge a room by the show it writes, because there are a lot of factors. And like, honestly, I didn't think Desperate Housewives would be the great room for me, but it was a room that had opportunities, and it had like 5 executive producers with multicam experience. So it was a great room for me. And if you had told me, 15 years ago, Desperate Housewives is a show for you, I would have thought you were crazy. So, just make sure you go into it and worry about the people, not the show itself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Senator Marshall, thank you for coming. So do comedians, or rather writers, go to see stand-ups? Because as far as I was told, actors, to get more exposure, especially if they're great at comedy, should do stand-up. So I'm now doing stand-up. But do you go, the comedy writers go to see stand-up?
I guess I might be the comedy writer. I did for a long time. I don't think, it depends what you're talking about, and there was a great episode of Studio 60 where they went out to see some stand-ups to get a new writer, kind of a thing. So I'm sure there are examples that you could point to for it. What I would say is that stand-up probably helps your writing more than it helps you get discovered. And then the other side of that is, why just do stand-up? It's a lot easier for someone to discover you through a video online, either of your stand-up or of something else. That was how Danny Glover basically got on 30 Rock, was his video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You? Yes.
Thank you for coming. I would like you to interview, tell me the relationship of writing and technology. If you're writing, let's say, for Pan Am, you know that vision needs this kind of technology to achieve it, versus if it was, say, written when technology was so expensive to achieve. So when you're writing, do you think about, is it achievable? Can it be done under 4 million? Can it be done under 1 million? Or you just write what you feel you want to write?
I think once you've been a TV writer and producer for even a short amount of time, you start thinking, you can't help but think, can we achieve this? It's not it's wonderful to think, oh, I'm just going to write whatever I want, but you only have so many days to shoot. You only have so much money. You're only allowed so many locations. So you're constantly thinking about that. I wouldn't say I'm thinking about it from a technology point of view, because I don't know all the technology that production uses. I also sometimes I will think, well, there's no way we can do this. And then I'm told, no, we can totally do that. But this other thing that you wanted to do, we can't do that. But what I will say is a show like NCIS wouldn't exist without the advances in editing and the editing going from, into the digital realm, because at least at the beginning of that show, there were so many cuts per scene, you could never have actually spliced film that many times, but then we didn't have to anymore. And suddenly it opened a whole new world. And even more so as we moved on, we don't shoot on film anymore. We shoot completely digital now. And it's changed, and it's given us a lot more versatility than we ever would have had. Now, as a writer, do I think about that? No, but I've seen how it blossoms for us.
Also in the world of digital, if you are, the writing actually sometimes serves to push for us, for me personally, I know app development and our website development forward, because we'll start writing, we'll start thinking about the way we want the audience to interact with the content. And we'll meet with our engineers, we'll meet with our broadcast engineers and our coding team and our dev team, and our dev team is the same as the coding, our dev team and our web team. And they'll say, well, that doesn't exist right now, but we've been thinking about that. Let's try to do it. And that can birth some really interesting technology and ways of broadcasting shows online that really were not thought of or viable, any 2-3 years ago. The leaps are incredible. The thought of, streaming 6 cameras simultaneously, taking in 2 broadcast feeds, putting them out on a feed on ABC, and then having people interact with that through a chat room that's embedded, and then having them vote for what they're actually going to see on the show, on Dancing with the Stars, was not thinkable even 2 years ago. But we had the ability to do it this year, and we had the ability to do it even better this next season. So.
Okay, on that note, we have to say goodbye. So I'd like to thank my panelists very, very much. Thank you all. And most of all, thank you to my hero with the MacBook.